Hi, I'm Noel with creationeffects.com, and today we're making trippy, endless tunnel animations in Adobe After Effects using an After Effects template called Creation Trippy Effects. These animations are done all on a single shape layer, and the tunnel is completely customizable using slider controls. So you can adjust the shape and colors and the speed and movement of the camera. I'll show you how to use the optional effects to create a variety of different looks, and I'll end by showing you how to create your tunnel from a custom shape that you can draw with a pen tool or from the shape of your footage with an alpha channel. Like I said, I'll be using the Creation Trippy Effects template, which includes this effect and about 100 other trippy effects, including a bunch of hypnotic or mesmerizing animations, as well as some really trippy psychedelic looks for your footage. So I'll put a link in the description so you can go check that out, but let's get started with the endless tunnel effect. Alright, I have my Creation Trippy Effects template open. It's a huge template, lots of effects. You can find the endless tunnels effect inside this animations folder here. I actually call it shape tunnel because it's made from After Effects shapes. So just open that up and let's take a look. So you can see there's camera movement and rotation as you go through this tunnel, and this will just go on forever. So let's look at how to customize this thing. First of all, we've got some instructions here. This one is just kind of an overview of how it works, and then this one has some cool things that you can do. To customize it, just select this shape tunnel layer and then go to your Effect Controls panel. And if you don't see this panel, just go to Window and choose Effect Controls. And you've got your shape tunnel controls here. These are all the customization controls. You can see they're divided into categories. So these ones affect the shape. These ones affect the stroke. And this one affects the tunnel as a whole. And then you've got some camera behavior controls down here. And then below that, you've got some optional effects here. And we'll look at those later. So I'm just going to kind of briefly go over some of these controls. You've got your random seed here. So any qualities that are created randomly, like the camera movement, if you just change that number, it'll generate a new random motion. In the shape controls, we can change this shape. You can see we've got kind of a star shape right now. So you can change the number of points. If you just drag it, you might get some uneven lines because you can see we've got a decimal number here. But if you enter in just a whole number, everything will be even. You can see this previews in real time, so that's kind of cool. Shape layers are pretty fast. So you can change this into a square or a circle or a triangle. You can see with 4 points, you can actually see more than 4. So that's the outer radius or inner radius button. So if you adjust that, you can turn this into a square, or you can kind of make this into a circle. Right now it's an octagon, 1, 2, 3, 4, octagon, but you can also change this into a circle by using this round corners control. If you use negative numbers, it does some weird things. And you've got a pucker and bloat. You can bloat it or use a negative value and pucker it, whatever that means. And in the stroke appearance controls, you can set the width, obviously, and the color, and the color wiggle amount if you want it to change over time. So these color wiggle controls are affecting this effect down here, the color balance effect. You can make dashes if you want and offset them. So these can be keyframed if you want them to move. Any of these controls can be keyframed. And then in the tunnel appearance controls, these first two controls, we've got tunnel length, which is the number of copies, and then the spacing between the copies. These two need a little bit of explanation. So let me first show you how this effect is made. I'm going to make my timeline a little bigger, and I'll expand this layer and then expand this contents folder. So this is where we find our shapes. We've got these two shapes, two polystars, group 1 and group 2. Let me just hide one of these. And now if we only look at that one group, you can see there are gaps in our tunnel. So if I open up that group, and I'm going to turn off this repeater, and then if I play that back, you can see we've got a tiny little shape just floating around. And it's this repeater effect that makes all these different copies of the shape. And here's a secret. They're not actually coming at us in 3 dimensions. They're just expanding. They're getting bigger. That's what this repeater effect is doing. It makes all these copies and then it grows them. All of that is done using expressions down here inside this repeater effect. But this presents a problem once the different copies grow to be too big. After Effects can't handle it anymore. So if we were to just use one group of polystars, just one path with one repeater, and the copies would continue to increase and they would get bigger and bigger, the effect would stop working eventually because it would just be too much for After Effects. So what I've done is I put a limit on it. It goes up to a certain point and then it starts over again. But that means that there are these gaps in the tunnel. So I've made 2 groups and they're in sync with each other so that this group fills in the gaps in this group. You can see I'll hide this one and unhide this one, and you can see it starts right where the other one ended. All right, so what does that have to do with these controls? Let's say you want to increase the spacing between these. If you're just changing it a little bit, it's no problem. But if you increase this too much, you can see it disappeared because our shape layer got too big. So if you increase the spacing, you should decrease the tunnel length. So let's say we double the spacing, go from 15 to 30. A good rule of thumb is to just halve the tunnel length and make this 20. And you can see increasing the spacing actually affected the speed. There is a speed control further down that you can adjust. So that works in the other direction too. If we were to halve the spacing, make these closer together, let's say something like 7, then we'd probably double the tunnel length. Okay, curviness. You can make your tunnel curve more. All that's really doing is changing the position of the shape, and you can see it's always moving. There's a wiggle expression on the shape, so you can adjust the wiggle speed and the wiggle amount, or you can keyframe it if you want more control over the position using this control here. You can twist it. The shadow control is cool. If I turn up the shadow, you can see it got darker on these corners, and you can offset that. So now these areas that are kind of sunken in are darker. It makes it look a little more 3D. And you can see if I toggle the transparency grid here, you can see that these areas aren't actually darker, they're just thinner. Maybe that affected their opacity too. So those shadows might only really look like shadows if you've got a black background like this. Okay, camera behavior, we talked about that. You can adjust the speed and the amount that the camera rotates. It's all random, or you can keyframe it manually using this rotation manual control. The destabilize camera control, if that's at 0, then the shape is always going to be in the middle. And when you turn that up, the camera will be pointing in different directions. So further down, we've got some optional effects. You can just turn them on to see what they look like. Lots of stuff to play with. But there are a lot more possibilities. In our contents folder, we can have effects that are designed for shapes. So I've already got a bunch right here, and you can come up with a lot of crazy looks with these. You can add a stroke to the stroke, and I mean you could even duplicate this and adjust each one's color. There's 2 different kinds of fills. There's a gradient fill and a regular fill, solid fill. If you turn one on, it just kind of adds this gradient behind the stroke, but if you use both, it gives you these alternating colors, which kind of makes it look more like a solid tunnel. The only downside though, and you can see it more if I turn up the curviness, we can see through these walls. They're not really solid. So you can see the end of the tunnel here and it looks kind of funny. I don't like that, but there's really nothing I can do about it. So you might want to keep that in the middle if you're using these walls. The wiggle paths is a good one. And the wiggle transform is also very cool. But if I play this back, you'll see a problem. You can see here, the wobble is affecting each group of shapes individually. So there's a little gap there. So the workaround for that is you can just hide your second group and then just increase the copies for this first group. So that's the tunnel length control. Just turn that way up to maybe 100. And eventually it's going to run out of copies, or the effect will just disappear because the layer got too big. But you could also turn down the speed, and that's going to give you an even longer animation. You can use a zigzag effect on this. So lots of opportunity to get creative with these. Okay, let me show you how to make a change to the tunnel at a specific point so that you would be able to see that change coming as you're going through the tunnel. That's not really possible with the controls because, as you can see, the controls affect the tunnel as a whole. So they affect both groups together. So let me show you how I would get around that. I would hide one of the groups so that we can only see the other one. And I'll go forward to a frame where that disappears right there. And I'll open up that group, and there's lots of properties here that you can keyframe. We just need to find the right one. I'll open up stroke, and let's change the color and the stroke width. So I'll expand those, and you can see we've got expressions here. We just need to turn those off by clicking on this little equal sign icon. And I'll change these values back to what they were. So this was red, and this was at 0.7. And I'll add a keyframe for those, and then go forward just one frame. That's the page down button. And we can change this to whatever we want. Let's do 2.5. Okay, and now close that group and unhide the other. And you can see the whole thing changes, and that's not what we want. And that's because if we open up the other group and find those properties, this expression is telling this property to just be whatever the property is in this group. So it changes with that first property. So we need to turn off those expressions and keyframe these manually, just like the other ones. And we'll set these to the same values the other ones had. Now let's say you wanted to reverse the direction of the camera. So right now we're moving forward, but what if we wanted to pull the camera back? It's not really possible using the controls, but what you can do, pre-compose this shape tunnel comp. So we can just drag that into this icon. That puts it in a new comp. So we're in shape tunnel 2 now. And we can just trim this layer to whatever length we want. Option and right bracket button. And now we can just reverse this layer by going to layer and time reverse layer. We can also draw our own shape using the pen tool and use that to create our tunnel. Just select this pen tool, make sure no layer is selected down here, and you can draw whatever you want. Alright, and then open up that layer, expand the contents and the shape folder, and then expand path 1. And all we have to do is select this part, the path, and copy it, Control or Command C, and you can delete that layer. And then expand your shape tunnel layer, open up your contents and your Polystar folder, and then we just need to select the group, and then you can paste it, Control or Command V, and now just drag this path that you just pasted up to the top where your Polystar was, but hide the Polystar, and then do the same thing for the other group. Just select the group folder and paste, move it up, and hide the original path. And let me show you something else you can do. I've got some footage here of a guy dancing on a green screen, and I'll bring that in. So what we can do is make a path that outlines his shape. You don't have to draw anything, it'll all be automatic, and we can use that path to create our tunnel. So first you'll want to set your out point for however long you want your animation to last. And we need to get rid of the green screen, so I'm going to add a key light effect. I'll just set it to key out the green. And let me solo this layer so we don't see our tunnel. Alright, so now we just have the guy with a transparent background, and now we can auto trace him. So that's under layer, and then auto trace. And make sure this is set to work area, and then just click OK. And now if we scrub through, you can see the path follows him perfectly. Open up your layer, and I'm going to open up masks. And you can see it created several masks because it wasn't a perfectly clean key. So you can see some little areas here have been traced. I'm just going to delete all these other ones so that we just have this main path. I'll open that up, and here we can see our mask path. So that's what I'm going to select, and I'm going to copy it. And we don't need this layer anymore. I'll delete it, and then I'll expand my shape tunnel layer, and this is a little different. If we just try and paste it into this group, it doesn't work. You can see all it did was add a mask to the layer. It's down here, and we don't want a mask on this layer. But what you can do is add a new path. So go to the little add button and just click on path. This is from before. I'll just delete that. And then open up that path folder and select the path, and then paste. And you can see that pasted all of the keyframes, and we'll want to do that in the other group too. I'll delete that butterfly path. So with group 2 selected, click the add button, click path, open it up, select the path, and paste. So now both groups have our auto traced path. Now you can see our camera actually travels outside of the tunnel here a little bit. And sometimes that can be a really cool effect, but that's not what I want. And you'll find that if you try and adjust the camera position using the controls, it doesn't work anymore because it's not set up to control that new path. But one thing we can do is we can scale it up. Let's make this 50%. So if you wanted, you could bring your footage in and you can put that guy right on top of this. Alright, that's everything I wanted to show you with this effect. I hope you like it. Go check out the Creation Trippy Effects template. There's a ton of cool stuff in there if you like trippy stuff, which I know is kind of a trend right now. So the link is in the description so you can watch the demo video and see examples of some of the cool stuff you can make. Alright, thanks for watching.